Hi there everyone, happy Friday and happy week 2 of our Cardi KAL, also known as Cardigan Knit Along, and an adventure in cardigan knitting. So how is everyone doing this week? Are you getting used to the new restrictions? And are you getting a lot of progress done on your cardigans? I've started mine. I'm going to show you that one today and let you guess which one I chose. Last week I was deciding between option number 1 and option number 3. We've had a few new knit-alongers join us this week, so welcome everybody. It's never too late to join. This is a 4-week knit-along. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. for about 45 minutes for a little catch-up and update with some tips and just to see what's new. And then the 5th week we will have our prize draw. So I do have the prize today. I'll show you that in a while. And as you join up for the knit along, I put your name on a ballot and I put it in our ballot box. And then on week 5 we'll do a live draw for our lovely prize. Sponsored by Muskoka Yarn Connection, of course. So maybe I'll start with a recap of the 3 sweaters or cardigan choices that we had to choose from. Option number 1. Here we have the lovely olive basket, and we titled this one as a beginner level just because it does not have a great deal of shaping. The shaping is basically on the sleeve cap, the shoulders, and the front decrease to create a bit of a V shape. The borders are built in as you go, which is a great bonus. And it is just simple stocking stitch, knit a row, purl a row, combined with the pretty border stitch, which is a double moss stitch or double seed stitch. So that is option 1. And option 2, I think this is the most popular one that you've all picked. Mary Shen. This is designed by Isabel Kramer, and it is available in Ravelry. All 3 patterns are available in Ravelry. I'll make sure I put the links in the comments later today. So this one is our intermediate level because it's knit from the top down, and it does incorporate lace work, directional increases, and there's no cables. We left the cables for option number 3. So buttonholes, ribbing, lace work, and double seed stitch. It's a nice relaxed classic cardigan, and it gives you that pretty raglan sleeve effect. So that is option number 2. And the last choice is option number 3, of course, and it is called the Blendin Wood Cardigan. This is the advanced level. The construction is pretty straightforward. The back, the 2 fronts, the sleeves are all seamed, so there's no top-down knitting, and the stitches are picked up for the front border. But the reason it is the advanced level is the degree of cable difficulty. There's 3 different cables going on at one time, so that just takes a little bit more focus and concentration. Okay, so those are our 3 options, and we're going to go over each of the different cardigans. Just as you're working through it, you might have some questions, and I might be able to provide you with some shortcuts or tips. Hi Karen, happy Friday to you too. And then we'll just recap the type of yarn that we've chosen for the knit along. It's a fairly new yarn called Echo Tweed DK, and it is a standard DK tension, which means 22 stitches. in stocking stitch and 28 rows on 4mm. But of course that depends on your own personal tension. If you're a loose knitter, you may have to go to a 3.5 or a 3.75 to get the standard gauge. And if you're a tight knitter, you may possibly have to go to a 4.5, although that is very rare. So this I will bring up to the camera so you can see the tweed bits. So it looks a lot like a very classic British tweed, but it's actually all organic, and it's a combination of wool, alpaca, and lyocell, which we talked about last week. That comes from the pulp of wood fiber. So luckily this week I did receive a new shipment. I'm just basically taking whatever the supplier has in this yarn to fill people's requests. So I was able to get more of the plum color, more of the olive green, and this beautiful red color. If you have not seen the red on camera, it is quite stunning with little flecks of blue and green. And then I'll show you the green. So you're all caught up. I've shown you the plum. This is that pretty cherry red. And it does not have an orange cast at all. It's a true blue red. And then the olive green. So that is a medium olive green with flecks of gold, black, warm caramel, and a creamy beige. So those are the three colors that are still in stock, and it doesn't take much for whatever size you're doing. It's basically about 3 or 5. Oh, I have somebody at the door. I'm going to be right back. Sorry, we're closed.
How are you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just call or email and leave a message.
You and I exchanged emails about the sunshine shawl, and I was going to try and arrange for that pickup.
Okay.
I've been kind of crazy. So.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so those are the three colors. Does everyone know it's Selfish Knitting Month? January, every year, worldwide Selfish Knitting Month. So the best part about that is at the end of the month, you're going to have something beautiful just for yourself to wear. If you get the cardigan done this month, it can always drag on into February, and February is known as Finish It February worldwide. So you have the option of finishing all your WIPs, works in progress, UFOs, unfinished objects, or the cardigan that you're working on in January. I also found out that it is another special month. It's also International Creativity Month. So that's something else worldwide for the month of January, and that is basically just to encourage us to celebrate our internal creativity, which of course includes knitting. So let's see who is here. Nancy, great instructions for option 3. Good. Yeah, I was wondering how everybody was finding their pattern instructions. Are they very clear, easy to decipher? I know many people around the world have knit these 3 cardigans, so we know there's no mistakes in any of the 3 patterns. That's not an issue. They've been well tested and well knit, but it's always nice to hear feedback on the designer's style of instructions, because some designers can put too much information in and that can be more confusing, and then some designers put less information in, which does not help to clarify. Hi Sharon. Sharon is working on the beautiful red. Hi Cindy. Oh, and I have to mention we've had a couple of progress pics posted on the events page, And I just checked today, one was in a beautiful navy blue, option number 2, and she was past the sleeve underarm section, and she put a lace panel down the back, which was an option that we discussed last week. And then also we had a beautiful red cardigan shown progress pic, option number 2 as well. So we're waiting to see progress pics now of option number 3 and option number 1. So keep it even Steven. Oh, thanks, Lynn. This is my little Fair Isle cape that I wear to keep my back and shoulders warm, because we're doing curbside pickup, so every time I open the door I get a real chill. So I find this really helps. So I guess I will show the prize to get your interest peaked. It's a heavy one. So for this knit along, we have packaged up some Zing circular needles and 2 project books from Cadia that have an array of easy knit patterns, sweaters, toques, scarves, shawls, even a bit of crochet in there. And we put in our store mug, Knit, Smile, Relax, a nice skein of natural yarn, and some of those pretty vintage stork scissors in gold. And Knitter's Pride has supplied us with circular needle protectors. So there's lots of gadgets in this knit along prize, as well as books for inspiration. And the Knitter's Pride circular needle protectors are actually what I have on my whip. So they're just little silver aluminum type tubes, colored. You get 3 in a package, pink, turquoise, and orange. So you can share them with a friend or keep them all for yourself like I do. So how they work is they have a silicone or rubber end. The other end is just a hollow tube, which doesn't serve any purpose. And you push your circular needle tips through the silicone. And that means your stitches cannot fall off your circular needles. It's very secure, easy to carry around. Plus, because I work with wooden needles primarily, I like the Knitter's Pride Dreams needles. These are wooden tips. They are subject to breaking if somebody were to sit on them, or if I had it in my project bag and my project bag got jammed between my car seat or through the side of the couch or the back of the couch. Who knows what could happen, but because they're wood, they could break. So this protects them. The wooden tips are completely encased in the protective tube. Now if you have a larger circular needle tip, say larger than about 5.5, then you're better off to put one tip in one tube and the other tip in another tube. So make sure you keep two tubes for yourself if you're thinking of sharing. So they are very, very handy. Now I'm just going to show you my project up at the camera. By now you've probably guessed which one I'm doing. Not option 1. Hi Sandy, thanks for joining. Hi Hetty. Hi Cindy. And hi Rhonda. I think I've seen all of you now. Yes, so I'll bring this up to the camera and you can see I've chosen option number 3, and I am up about 7 inches into the back of the cardigan. So this is my center cable, which is I think what they call an OXO cable, because it makes an X and then an O. X and O, hugs and kisses. And then I do have my A-line shaping secretly hidden in the purl sections on either side of the back cable. And then I have a wave cable on either side, and you'll notice that the wave cable goes to the right, on the right hand side of the center, and goes to the left. So that is a clever design element. It's always good to notice little things like that. And then the sides of my pattern have the honeycomb cable. And the honeycomb cable I'm really enjoying because I like the way it opens up, and I find that it keeps the yarn very light. There's no weight to it. I mean, it's almost see-through, but it creates little pockets of warmth. And the other thing I really like about the pattern design is how neatly the ribbing, this is something to look for too when you're looking at well-designed patterns. You can see that the ribbing is not just a consistent knit 2, purl 2 all the way across, because that would not line up with the cables. So what she has done is she has matched up her knit 2, purl 2 ribbing so that the honeycombs branch off of the knit stitches. And then the wavy cable branch off of the knit stitches. And the center cable has a wider welt here, and that branches off very neatly. Has anyone else noticed that? And the same on this side and the wave cable. It's very, very well designed. So far, I can't find any complaints to mention about it. So I'll leave that out so I can demonstrate a couple of stitches on it. Hi, Debbie. Oh, Sharon, you put your needles in, did you put them in this end? Yeah, that would not work. They would not stay secure in there, they would just fall out. Have to use the opposite end. It looks a bit like fish lips, and just stick the tips in there, and it's really, really secure. Now, you might have noticed also that I'm a lazy knitter when it comes to markers. So I started off as the pattern requested, and I had all my markers on the needle to keep my patterns organized. But after a while I get really tired of slipping so many markers across the row. I mean, here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a lot for my speed. So I've just clipped them into the knitting, and I can follow up from there to make sure that each pattern changes on the appropriate stitch. It's a little bit daring, but it works. It works for me. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. And I do like the locking stitch markers. These are the clover markers because they open and close. So I have the option of putting them on my needle between the stitches or clipping them into the work like I've done here. Always good to have versatile tools. Now, has anybody come across any difficult sections in their pattern that they need to have clarification on? I know that we had somebody working on, hi Elizabeth, I think I missed saying hello. Somebody was working on option number 2, and she found it a little bit confusing on round 20. Now I think round 20 she was good. She was good till round 20 because it was all clearly written out. And then the next page sort of left her guessing a little bit. So at that point she has to start introducing the lace panel on each of the fronts. And unfortunately, because she hasn't got all her increases yet, she's still shaping the neck and she's shaping the raglan increases. So she doesn't have the full number of stitches to create the lace panel, because the lace panel takes up about 20 something for those of you who are knitting it. Depending on your size, I think it's over 20 stitches. So all she can do is work sections of the lace panel until she has the full number of stitches, and then she'll have the full lace panel. So it's a little bit congested. There's a lot going on when you're doing a top-down cardigan. You have to keep in mind that you're increasing constantly to create the raglan, and then you're also creating the round neck So you're adding on stitches on the opposite side of the front, and then you're trying to set up your lace panel pattern and also the double seed stitch. So you have to be a little bit patient and just take it stitch by stitch and row by row. But we did post some helpful pictures on the events page, and that shows a close-up of the first 20 rows and how the pattern is starting to emerge. So I hope that's helpful on number 2. I think if I can demonstrate today on my sample, I thought I would demonstrate the honeycomb stitch or the honeycomb cable, because in most patterns they're explaining the honeycomb cable, which happens over 2 stitches. They're explaining it with a cable needle. That means you're using a cable needle for 1 stitch, and you have to repeat that honeycomb pattern about 14 times in sequence. So you can imagine how slow and frustrating it can be. So I like to do it without a cable needle, so I'm going to try and show you that on camera, and hopefully that will help to give you another option if you feel you'd like to live dangerously and maybe save your cable needle for the center panel and the wavy zigzag cables. Some of you already know the trick how to knit without a cable needle when it's a very small mini cable, so I'm sure I'm not showing you anything new. And then I'm also going to show you how to do the SSK and the SSP. Those are generally American terms. SSK is the same as our SKP, which is slip one, knit one, pass one over. So I'll demonstrate those on camera and see if it's helpful to some of you. And oh, Rhonda, her yarn arrived today. Yay, your weekend is just about to start. Now the reason I chose the beige for my my project, my Cardi KAL, was out of default. I waited till everybody had picked their colors, and then I said to myself, whichever color is left, because I like them all equally, I will go with that. And at the end of last week, the beige was left, so I said, okay, it's time for me to cast on. So I started mine Wednesday night, and I'm doing about 3 inches a night. The other thing I want to mention too on option 3 is that I know I'm going to make the body longer, and we've talked about sizing last week. So if you're choosing to knit the body longer up to the underarm, for my size, it's stating that I should decrease on every 6th row to create the A-line shaping. I'm going to stretch that out and do it on every 8th row. That way it gives a little bit more proportion to my body length, because I'm lengthening the whole cardigan, so I don't want everything to happen near the bottom. Okay, so I'm set up here in my honeycomb pattern. And the honeycomb pattern is basically worked over 4 stitches, 2 knits, 2 purls, and you don't have to do the cable on every right side row, which gives you a nice break. You've got 3 relaxing rows where you just follow the sequence of the stitches, knit above knits, purl above purls, and then the 4th row is where everything changes. So instead of using a cable needle here to put my purl stitch at the back of the work, I'm going to do the 2-stitch cable without the cable needle. And of course I knit continental, so that might throw you off a little bit. So I'm lifting the 2nd stitch towards me. I'll get the needle in and I'll show you. Okay, so I've grabbed the 2nd stitch at the front. I need to get my yarn behind it, and I'm going to knit the 2nd stitch. But I can't release it. It has to stay in that position. And then I'm going to purl the 1st stitch. So my yarn is in front, and I'm just going in purl ways. on the first stitch, and then wrapping the yarn over and through. So I've completed one knit and one purl in opposite sequins, and they're both sliding off together. So you can see now that's pulling the cable stitch to the right. And I have to do the second part of the honeycomb, which is the tricky one. I have to purl the second stitch first before I knit the first stitch. So my method is I go behind and I go into the second stitch from the back. I'm going to try and get the yarn out of your way. Okay, so I'm in position. I've got my second stitch on my right needle, but my first stitch is in the way. So I do a quick little flip and grab the first stitch onto the left needle, which is sort of like my stand-in for a cable needle. And then I just slip the second stitch into position on the left needle, and I know I have to purl one, and then I knit one. Okay, so that's how you close the honeycomb. You've got the right cable, and then you've got the left cable. So I'm going to do one more. You're probably getting dizzy looking so close. So I have to knit the second stitch and purl the first stitch. So I go into the second stitch knitways, get my yarn in position, knit, and then I have to swing my needle to grab the first stitch purlways, and they both come off together side by side. So I've done a knit and a purl. And then one more of the tricky one, which is purl first. So I go in through the back and grab my second stitch. And then I'm going to do a quick little flip, position the first stitch into the second position, and then I know I have to purl, and then I knit. So that is the shortcut if you don't want to use a cable needle for 2-stitch cables. Try it. You could always practice on a separate sample practice piece before you do it on your cardigan. You probably will still find that you use a cable needle for 3-stitch cables, 4-stitch cables, and so on. It takes a bit of practice to get up to doing those without a cable needle. I do all my cables without a cable needle, no matter how big they are or how small. That might make me a lazy knitter, I'm not sure. So that was just a quick demo on how to do a cable without a cable needle. Has anyone done that before? Have you tried it? I know there's at least one of you knit-alongers who does her cables without a cable needle, but I don't think she's working on option number 3. So the other demo I wanted to show you was how to do the SSK and the SSP. SSK is when you have to decrease 2 knit stitches together, and it is a directional decrease. And then the SSP is when you have to decrease 2 purl stitches together. So that usually happens on a wrong side row, and you'll notice that all 3 cardigans use both. They use the SSK and the SSP. So it is something worth seeing as a demo, I think. Okay, so we're pretending we're doing an SSK first. So SSK is the American way, which is a little bit slow and tedious, and it has the exact same outcome as doing an SKP, which is slip, knit, pass over. So in that case, we always slip the first stitch knitways, and then we knit our second stitch, and then we pass the first stitch over. So that's decreasing 1 stitch. Now if you're doing the American way, we would be slipping one stitch knitways, slipping a second stitch knitways. And then we're passing those two back to the left needle, which you can easily do two at once. And then we knit through those two together through the back. So that creates the exact same effect as the SKP. The direction of the decrease is turned to the left. And for the SSP, we'll pretend we're on a purl row. We're going to slip one purl. I know it looks like a net, we're just pretending. And then we're slipping the second purl. So they're both slipped knitways, which changes their direction. And then we slip both back on to your left needle. And then we have to purl those two together from the back. So that means yarn is in front, always when you're purling, and your right needle is going to position itself in the back of the second stitch first, and then the first stitch. See if I can get the yarn out of my way. Okay. So I'm going through the back of the second stitch together and the back of the first stitch, and then I straighten out my needles, yarn over, and I purl through and out the back. So that creates a directional stitch, decrease, which goes to the left. So that is a little trickier than doing the knit decrease. When you have to work from the back of the second stitch, it's almost like knitting gymnastics. You have to force your needle into the back of the second stitch and then the first stitch, and then straighten them out so it looks more like what a purl would resemble. So good luck with those two. Yes, Evelyn. Evelyn is my star pupil when it comes to doing cables without a cable needle. She just took the leap of faith and tried it, and she caught on to it very well. In previous classes, we've tried to instruct, during a project on how to do the no cable needle cable. Some people are just more comfortable with a cable needle, and some people feel more awkward with it. So it's personal preference again. You might want to try it, or just trust your cable needle. There are different types of cable needles too. If you're not happy with the bent cable needle, you have an option of trying a straight one, a wooden one, which we sell, or you can go with the J-hook cable needle. And also, if you find your cable needle is just dangling and it gets in the way, try sticking it into your knitting. So if this was my cable needle, when I have the stitches on the cable needle, I just stick it into the knitting, and that keeps it out of the way and makes you have an extra sense of security. So there's always little things that we learn along the way on every adventure, and this one is certainly a cardigan adventure. I also want to show you today, we just received a new shipment of handmade wooden buttons. So I'm going to bring these up to the camera. What's special about these is that they're made primarily with Ontario woods, and they're made by a woodworker who is in Owen Sound, Markdale area. We've carried his wooden buttons for a long time, and he does lots of different wood grains and coloring. And I was just thinking that one of the cardigans does call for buttons, and with the rustic texture of this yarn, wooden buttons would suit it very nicely, as opposed to metal or ceramic or plastic. So these are a 1-inch button. I've just measured them to be extra sure. Now he does a 2-hole round button. This is walnut. And this one is ash. It's a very pale color. And this is beech. So those are all Ontario woods. This one he imports the wood from Africa and then creates all different size buttons from it. And the last one is zebra wood, which is another native tree to Africa. So these are about the size of a toonie. I'm going to hold up the toonie in front of the button. So that gives you an idea if it would work for your buttonhole. And there is a little trick to determining what the best size button is for your buttonholes, because again, you can only go by what the pattern suggests, but your knitting style, your buttonhole might stretch a bit more than the next person or be a little bit tighter. So if you take a coin, maybe start with a nickel, or you could start with a dime, nickel, quarter, loonie or toonie, and just try putting the coin through the finished buttonhole, and that will tell you what size coin fits the best when you're trying to match up buttons. If we ever get to a store where we can buy buttons again. We can always buy them online, but it's good to know the size before you buy them. You want your button to be larger than your buttonhole, and you want it to slide through so that it's forcing the buttonhole to stretch a little bit. There's no sense in buying buttons or making buttons that slide through the buttonhole and there's extra space on either side, because you know they're just going to come undone. So it would be a waste of time to sew on pretty buttons and then take them off and put on a whole different size. Okay, so I've shown you the prize and got the ballots in from our new knit-alongers. I think we'll move on to trivia. Oh yes, most important. I wanted to hold this up. That should give everybody a lift today. When you think about it, January has gone by very quickly, and as of today we only have 64 more days till spring. So we can do it. And our winter in Muskoka, and I think most of Ontario, has been very mild. We are very low with snow, and we haven't had many very, very cold days. So we're doing extra good in that department too. So since we have such a beautiful red color in this yarn, I was kind of fascinated to learn more about where the red dye comes from. I didn't realize that it is one of the oldest colors that was dyed in clothing, textile, and for painting. But it's always been a color that represents prestige and power. In some cultures, red symbolizes joy and good fortune. And in Asian countries, brides wear red as a symbol of fertility and luck. So their wedding dresses are generally in red. The oldest form of red dye comes from a clay mineral called hematite. And there are actually existing cave paintings in Spain which date back before 16,000 BC. And it was paintings that you can see if you go to one of the modern Met websites. And they are bison painted with red clay. So it's a little bit more of a brownish clay than this, but it's very striking against the natural color of the cave rock. So today the trivia question is about the color red. And we're not going to go with the first person who guesses it because it's a little bit hard to keep track. We'll just go with a random pick. And it can be whatever you know of or research. What other natural material in nature can produce the dye color red? So that's the trivia question. So anybody who feels like answering it and is picked as the random incentive winner will get an extra ballot into our ballot box. So that means you get more chances to win. And we still have another 2 weeks, so chances are you might win one of those. So I think next week we'll cover a little bit more about the 3-needle bind off, because that is something you'll have to do if you're doing option number 1, join your shoulders without sewing seams. And I think possibly on option number 3, if the pattern does not call for the 3-needle bind off, I think we can still improvise and do that, for those of you who don't really want to sew seams. And then next week will be a little bit more about the sleeves, measuring, shortening, lengthening, getting a nice rounded decrease section if you're doing a set-in sleeve. That won't apply to option number 2. Option number 1 and option number 3 have sleeves that are sewn in. And then the 4th week we'll go into the finishing, picking up of stitches for front borders, if that is an option. Number 2 and number 3 have that. And adding button loops, if you would prefer to have buttons on cardigan number 1 and 3. You could have 1, 2, or 3 buttons. And the blocking. Blocking is always very important. And I think most of you after last week went back to the beginning and did your tension swatch and blocked it before you went ahead with your cardigan. So that just ensures a very successful outcome. And the last thing I wanted to leave you with is, oh yes, remember to pat yourself on the back, because you're doing great work on your project, no matter if you're just starting, you're in the middle, or you're ahead of the herd. You're doing great work, but you're also doing great work just getting through each day, through our long winter and through our constantly changing directives on what we should or should not be doing. So a nice pat on the back once a day will really boost our spirits. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great weekend, and please post progress pics. It really inspires me, and I think it inspires a lot of other knitters too. Just to see the colors knit up and sort of a close-up detail of the sections that we can't see, you know, in the overall picture that is shown on the pattern. Happy weekend.